Hey, AP Seminar. All right, in the previous video, we talked about how you're structuring this presentation. In this one, we're going to talk a little bit about how you actually create the visuals. The visuals in this presentation are a pretty big part of the grade. And even if they weren't, being able to communicate clearly through the use of audiovisual aids is a life skill. It's something that you will most likely have to use or do at some point, no matter where you're headed in terms of your future career. Now, you unfortunately have been the victim of quite a few bad presentations, some by me and some by your other teachers. There are a lot of things that we continually do in these presentations that are just bad practice. I'm trying to eliminate them from my practice, but I'm not yet done. But we're going to talk about those things. Now, I am not going to claim to be an expert on this, but I do have access to one. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at a TED Talk that is authored by a gentleman who has spent, I think he says in the video, about 4 years researching brain research, how people process new information, and applying that to the art of putting together visual aids for presentations. So what I like about this is two things. One, he uses research to support his position. He even tells you the studies that he references in order to make his conclusions about how people take in new information. And then the second thing I like about this is he actually demonstrates the skills that he's discussing so that you can see it, you can feel it. If he tells you it's effective, it's one thing, but when he shows you how effective it is, it's something altogether else. And so that's what you're going to be able to get from this video. Now, he's going to give you 5 tips that you should be aware of, that you will want to practice when you go ahead to put your presentation together. And your slide presentation, in part, will be graded on how well you're able to adhere to these tips. So let's go ahead and watch the video and get the information from this expert. And then after that, we'll go ahead and talk about what some of those tips are.
Now, my objective for this evening, for this 18 minutes, is to give you 5 design principles that will cognitively and psychologically optimize your PowerPoint slides. And if you haven't used them before, they will make a tremendous difference to every PowerPoint you will be delivering from this day and on. So let's start. The first one of these 5 is one message. I received this from a customer and I said, hey, we've got a lot of issues in here, but let's start with the first one. You got 2 messages. Let's move one of them out of the way and just bring 1 message per slide. So why should we only have 1 message per slide? Well, I'll give you this beautiful example. You're at this nice party, you got the music going, boom, boom. You got this person you're chatting away to, you're having a good time. Cha-da, cha-da, cha-da. And then you hear your name spoken somewhere. Your entire attention is now diverted in that direction. And then with this person, you're just nodding away, hoping that you're nodding in the right instances, yeah? Yes, yes, yes. After about a minute, this one stops talking about you, so you divert your attention straight again. Now, that person will then say, well, don't you agree? Why don't we just love that situation? We have got no clue what they've been talking about. The same thing goes for PowerPoint. If you got more than 1 message, the chance is big that they will be focusing on this one and not that one, or that one and not this one. Just make it simple for human beings. Have 1 message per slide. We are extremely limited to understanding more. Let's move on. Go to working memory. I've already given you this bad vibe that your working memory is bad, and I'm afraid I'm not coming with better news. I'm coming with worse news. And it goes like this. This equation has the basis of John Sweller and Meyer. And they come to the conclusion that there is something in our brain called the redundancy effect, and it works like this. If you have text, sentences on your PowerPoint, and you persist with the annoying idea of speaking at the same time, what will be remembered by the audience is 0. Or very close to 0. Now, why is that? How does that come about? Well, it can't look like this. It's just not practical. You can't stand and have this and talk at the same time. So what are you supposed to do? Well, use PowerPoint for what it's supposed to be used for. Pick it like this, pull down your text into the documentation field and use the area up there for the presentation material. Short, sweet bits of text and an image. That is what enhances your image. That is what enhances your message. So use PowerPoint as it's supposed to be used. Come to the third of these 5 principles, and that's size. Before I go into that, I want to make you aware of something, and that is the following. Every time you open your eyes for the rest of your life, you will focus on 4 things. Moving objects, signaling colors like red, orange, and yellow, contrast-rich objects, and big objects for the rest of your life. Give you a practical example of that. I want you to imagine yourself being home with a friend, a really good friend. Now the television is on, but the sound is off. You're having a great conversation, but do you find it easy to not look at the television? No. Why not? Because it's got moving objects, it's got signaling colors, it's high in contrast, and they're usually very big these times. So why not use this to our benefit? If you look at this, where is your attention drawn to? Without you even having a chance of controlling it. It's going to the big 3 all the time. Well, have a look at the practical situation. Have a look at this. Where is your eyes drawn to? Well, I can see that they're drawn to constantly to the headline. Now, how often is the headline the most important part in a PowerPoint? It's very rare. Even so, every PowerPoint template is built like this, where the headline is the biggest object and the content is the smallest, going absolute opposite to our biological reactions. So what does this look like if we just show you an example? Well, now I'll reduce the title and it looks like this. Do you see how your eyes now fall down into the content? Now they're sucked into the headline and now they're fallen down into the content. So I can control exactly where you are. But why do people build PowerPoints where people will be spending 70% of the time on the headline when it's not the most important part? So what I want you to take with you from this is the most important part of your PowerPoint should also be the biggest, nothing else. Moving on to number 4, contrast. Contrast controls your focus. So what does that look like? For instance, if I show you a list like this, your eyes are all over the place because you don't really know what to focus on. So I'll use a built-in functionality into PowerPoint which goes like this. I'll show you the first subject. I'll take it away with contrast and I'll show you the second one. And I'll do it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. You're now following exactly the white spot. If I do this, dun, 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 I can see your eyes just wobbling around and you're a bit like, a kitten going after a little laser pointer on the wall, going like, where is it, where is it? I've got it, I've got it, I've got it. Because you're following where the white spot is and not the rest. Now this is a beautiful example. Please do use this. Use it because you can show amazing big tables like this if you use the effect of contrast, the principle of contrast. Look what this looks like. Your eyes are all over the place. You don't know what to focus on. But I just apply the principle of contrast and it looks like that. And suddenly you know exactly what to focus on. Here, they're all over the place, and here, they're exactly where I want them. Now there's a big, major drawback with PowerPoints, and that is that the majority of companies on this earth today, they persist in having white backgrounds in PowerPoint. Look at that. Oh, it's bright, it's shiny. Could you tell me who has the highest contrast, me or the screen? Well, the screen. Who is usually the biggest, me or the screen? Well, the screen. So the only option I have is dress myself up in signaling colors and jump around on stage in order to balance that problem out. Now, that is obviously not a good corporate strategy in the long term, would it be? I think the long-term strategy is to just switch it around. PowerPoint is not supposed to have white backgrounds. If I do this, your eyes relax. You focus on me. I'm the biggest object. I'm the most contrast-rich object. I got your focus. Why is that important? It's important because I always have been, and I always will be the presentation. That is my visual aid. Moving into the last principle, and that is objects. Now, this is one of the most severe principles, and it goes like this. How many objects do I have here? Well, if you count them quickly, you'll see that I've got 16. Do you see this little beauty at the end as well, which goes page 12 of 95? What is that? Why do we do that? That only creates anxiety, if anything. You're like, oh my God, I can't take 83 more of those. But it can also create hope. Because imagine when it's 90 out of 95. Oh, I can see the light. I can see the end of the tunnel. Kidding aside, don't do that. Now, there are so many ideas out there on how many objects you're supposed to have in PowerPoint. And once and for all, I just want to put my foot down and state to you that this is the perfect amount. And in order to do that, I want you to feel it yourself. How many objects are you supposed to have? And we're going to do that by showing you a couple of balls. I'll throw up the balls. I want you to nod to me when you've counted them. Simple instruction. You with me? Cool. Here we go. Boom. All right. Takes you about 2 seconds. Good. Well done. And your next set of balls, count them and nod to me when you've counted them. Here we go. Excellent. Yeah. It took you about 1.2 seconds if you're normal, which about 90% of you seem to be. We'll have the third set of balls, the last one. Look at this. Nod to me when you've counted them. Whoa. What was that? I just pressed the button and you nodded simultaneously. That will, if you are normal, take you 0.2 seconds. 2/10 of a second. This will take you 1.2. This will take you 2/10 of a second. And for any one of you who you're good at maths, you'll find out that that number is approximately 500% difference. How is that even remotely possible? There are only 2 objects in difference. Well, might I suggest the following? This one you have to count, and this one you see. Could that be correct? So what you've just experienced is the following, that the cognitive process of counting takes 500% longer time, requires 500% more energy resources to execute than just seeing. So, what I want you to keep in mind at all times, what I want you to keep in your head is this, which is a Swedish number for this. The magical number is 6. It's not 5, it's not 7, it's 6. And I want you to make you aware of this. When you go into a presentation in the future and you've built this amazing PowerPoint, if you've got more than 7 objects or 7 or more objects, you have to be aware that all the people in there, they have to use 500% more energy and cognitive resources to understand what's in your PowerPoint. Now, how do you think their energy-saving brain by nature behaves? Will it go like, ooh, I'll easily invest 500% more cognitive resources to understand this weird slide, or I won't. I won't. And you've just incurred death by PowerPoint. Now, what does this look like in real life? Well, have a look at this. 16 objects. Can we agree that that's too many? Yes, we can. So what does it look like if we reduce it? Look at this. We go from this to this. And this is where your brain goes, ah. And this is where your brain goes, ah. And I assume that in the future, when you deliver PowerPoints to your colleagues, to your fellow people, you want them to go, ah, when you show them your slides. You don't want them to go,
All right, let's really quickly go back over those tips that he's just given you and emphasize some of the ways this translates to your presentation. So tip number 1 was 1 message per slide. So as you're analyzing the problem and there are multiple issues in the problem, you just want to deal with 1 issue per slide or 1 perspective per slide. You don't want to jam too much. There's no limit to how many slides you can have. So try to focus people's attention on 1 aspect of the problem at a time or 1 aspect of the solution at a time by limiting your slides to 1 idea per slide. The second one was to use slide presentations appropriately. They aren't designed to deliver big blocks of text. That is what word processors are for. That's what books are for. Slide presentations are designed to be visual aids, things that help you communicate your message. You are the message, this is the aid. So you want things on there that accentuate what you're saying, not detract from it. And text, like he showed you in the research, if you're speaking while someone's reading, they get nothing out of either one. So limiting text and using PowerPoint as a signposting utility and to provide visuals. Now, amongst those visuals, charts and graphs are effective. But if you're using charts or graphs in your presentation for your TMP, you have to refer to the chart or graph. You have to actually point to it. You have to draw your finger along the lines so that we can see what you're referring to. You've looked at that chart or graph for 5 or 10 minutes to figure out what it says. We're going to see it for 30 seconds. So you need to point out exactly what it is that that chart communicates to us and how it does so. And if that chart is really cluttery, like in his video, he's got all those different columns with information, spring, summer, winter, fall, he grays out the things that are irrelevant. You can actually rebuild the presentations or rebuild the charts. If that's a line graph that has 17 lines on it and you only need 2, take the data that's represented on that line graph and get rid of all but 2 of those lines. Present us with a cleaner, easier to see graph that you then physically refer to by pointing to the elements on that graph that we're supposed to be paying attention to. So use PowerPoint appropriately. Size is important. Your biggest ideas, your most important ideas need to be the biggest thing on the slide. So keep that in mind as you're putting in headings and you're putting in helpful text. If that text is more important than the headings, the size should represent that. If the heading is what's important, the size should represent that as well. The next tip was how to use contrast. Remember, the contrast is either your enemy or your friend. Having light words against a light background makes it impossible to read the words. But graying out text once you're done with it makes us focus on the next piece of text. And so use contrast to your advantage. Gray out things that we're not supposed to see and brighten things that we are. And again, limiting the amount of text on a slide, but drawing our attention to exactly what it is that we're supposed to pay attention to. And then the last tips, number of objects on a slide, 6. 6 objects on a slide, 6 pieces of text, 6 images, 6 anything, but no more than 6. Try to keep us from having to exert all that energy because as he proved with the brain research, it takes 500 times more processing power to read 7 things than it does 5. So 6 is a nice landing point. So to recap those 5 tips, limit to 6 items, make sure you have 1 message per slide. Size is a issue. Use size to put the attention on the things that you want the attention on. Make sure that you don't forget about contrast and use PowerPoint for what it's designed for, to deliver images that help to accentuate your presentation, not to distract from it. Your presentation will be graded along the lines of those guidelines. How well you can adhere to as many of those tips as possible will factor into how you're evaluated. So design your presentation with that in mind. Finally, if I could make one other suggestion, there is a button down in the bottom right corner of a Google Slides presentation that if you click that, it will allow you to format your slides according to a certain style. I would play with that button. It is a really useful button, and I'll probably show that to you in class. But that will help you have a more unified look and feel to your presentations. Now that button sometimes is grayed out. If it's grayed out, there's too many things on the slide to employ those composition helps that this button will provide you with. But consider using that. And then finally, you want this to look like one unified presentation. So you have to settle on a color scheme and 2, maybe 3 fonts total. One font for headings, one font for captions, one font for information. But you don't want every slide to look like it comes from a different person. You want there to be a unified color scheme and a unified application of fonts per each slide. As always, if you have questions about this or anything else, let me know and I will do my best to get back with you. Thanks.